Yo, I'm Matt Williamson at Williamson NFL. How's everyone doing? Got the draft behind us, but we do want to do a recap. A lot of you have been asking me, I guess it was about a week ago, probably more than that, but it was shortly leading up to the draft, very close to the draft. I did a podcast here that you can go find, and I urge you to check it out or on YouTube, whatever, talking about over the 2 years that Omar Khan has been in charge of the Steelers draft, that he's been the GM, that he had some incredibly strong trends. Now, I warned us, it's only 2 years, small sample size, but there were three things that he, more than most GMs, one of them the most of GMs, had a very strong tendency. Leading up to this draft, Mason McCormick was the only non-big school draftee over those 2 years. The Steelers also had a very high percentage of draft picks that had visited on the 30 visit. You know how that works. And lastly, where he was the strongest, right there with the Bears GM and Colts. But number one was Omar Khan in terms of RAS scores, relative athletic scores, testing numbers. And again, RAS scores are, it's a combination of your size, how athletic you are for your position, your size, etc. So just if you're tiny and you blow up the testing, well, it doesn't translate to a great RAS score. If you're huge and you blow up the testing, wow, And Umari from South Carolina, Shamar Stewart, those guys are top RAS dudes. And they had both those guys in for visits, but that's neither here nor there because they are not Steelers. So this draft class, they drafted 7 players: Harmon, Johnson, Sawyer, Black, Howard, Bruner, Kent. As you know, all were from a big school except for Kent. But I will say the Steelers' ties to the MAC are very strong, and they have really good connections there. They've pulled a lot of players out from the MAC. Coach Tomlin said after the draft that it was not an agenda to go Big Ten crazy, but they went Big Ten crazy, including Castro, who we talked about before, an earlier one, 3 Iowa guys with Castro, 2 Ohio State dudes. Like the MAC, as you would imagine, the Steelers also have really strong ties, scouting staff, coaching staff, Dick LeBeau, Cam Hayward, with Ohio State. It's not far. And as I told you before, the head coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes, and the Steelers drafted Logan Lee last year, their head coach, Kirk Ferentz, went to Upper St. Clair High School. I mean, he's South Hills dude. So again, strong ties. So I don't think they were only going, Big Ten, but they hit the Big Ten hard. And the one player that they didn't was a MAC guy, which again, very good MAC ties. So I guess we'll say that tendency is definitely still very much in play. But I also want to warn you too that in this NIL transfer world, more and more, a higher percentage of every team's draft picks are going to come out of the Big Ten and SEC and big schools because you can just transfer up and get money, So, again, maybe that's not a super strong trend, but in 3 drafts, Kent and McCormick are the only 2 that weren't big school dudes. So I'm going to go with that's a pretty strong trend. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are played. With the largest selection of odds on everything from MLB, NHL, and UFC, even the Kentucky Derby and NFL season futures are ready for you to bet. In between games, head over to BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. How about the trend of visits? Harmon visited. Johnson visited. Sawyer did not. Black visited. Howard did not. Bruner did not. Kent did not. However, do you think you really have to have Mark Bruner's son in for a visit to know if he's a good dude? So I'm not exactly going to count that against him. That's pretty darn close to a visit when your head scout is his father, or not your head scout, but your West Coast scout is his father, and he's a former Steeler. So I'm not sure you had to have Bruner in for a visit. And I think they knew a fair amount about him. Back to the Ohio State point, I know they did extensive research on Howard, and I think they took Ohio State, including Howard and Sawyer, as they did with Jalen Milroe, out to dinner. So they brought in a lot of quarterbacks, but the ones they didn't, they had a lot of contact and research and face-to-face with. So I'm still going to kind of say that that's a massive trend, that real intense interactions, visit, scout son. I think that certainly counts when we look at Omar trends. So I'm going to say yes on big school, yes on visit is still holding up in a big way. This one's shakier though. The relative athletic score. That trend definitely took a hit. But kind of like we mentioned with the transfers, the NIL, the world of scouting is changing very drastically. And here's one reason why, is a lot of these players, much more so than in previous years, are just declining to do tests. If you're not a good tester, you just don't test now. It used to be everyone did it, whether you liked it or not. Especially shuttles and 3-cones, where there's a lot of these guys that just aren't doing them. So more than ever, when I go to the RAS database, there's just incomplete grades. There's not enough tests on there to go off of. Harmon was one of those. Johnson was one of those. Sawyer was one of those. In terms of didn't do enough testing, and this goes to combine and pro day. So this database uses both. So if you didn't do enough, you just have a blank. And all three of those guys have a blank. Now, I'll tell you why Sawyer didn't. He's not a good athlete. He just isn't. I mean, there's no way he would have had a strong RAS score. Johnson's 10-yard split was poor, and therefore his 40 was poor. Not poor. He ran 4.56. That's not poor. But his 10-yard split wasn't great. But he did reach 22 miles an hour on that run. So the speed was there. It just took him a little time to get going. But in the end, he didn't have enough testing. Harmon, I don't think his change of direction stuff is A+, but his straight line stuff's really good. I don't know if he would have scored over a 9. Again, it's a 10-point scale. Omar had quite an amazing history of getting guys with a 9 or higher RAS score, which is rare air. The next 3 picks all did test. Black was really bad, 3.61. Now, that's not horrendous, but it's bad. I mean, his athletic testing was flat out poor. I mean, that's not necessarily a failing grade, but it's pretty close. 3.61, again, on a 10-point scale. Howard's was really good, but not quite to that elite 9.0. He was at an 8.8 with a RAS score. Really good, though. I mean, a lot of that's because he's big, moves well. I think you're going to be impressed with his movement and size when you watch him week after week. And Bruner, this shocked me too, because on tape as a linebacker, not a special teamer, I don't think he changes directions real well, but his RAS score was an 8.85. really high. Again, 9 is really strong, and the Steelers have drafted a lot of 9s lately, but there's not many of them to pick from. So Howard was an 8.8, Bruner was an 8.85. So that close to qualifies, but they didn't get any 9s this year. Now the last one is Kent. He is not in the database. I assume it's just because he's a lower level prospect. But his testing would have been good. You know, at his pro day, he ran a 4.38 at 187 pounds. Now, the size isn't going to be great for him. 10-yard split of 1.53, pretty good. Vertical, 38.5, quite good. Broad jump, 10.3, quite good. Short shuttle, 4.38, quite good. And a 3-cone of 7.15, quite good. And 14 bench press reps for a 187-pound corner is real good. So while I don't have his exact RAS score, because for whatever reason he's not listed, I would say he certainly qualifies as a strong relative athletic score athlete. And one of the trends with Omar, if you remember from the podcast, and this is really an Eagles thing, is those real late round picks, 6th, 7th round picks. He's been taking really strong athletes and maybe they turn into something. Maybe they hit big. You know, I mean, Jordan Mailata with the Eagles is the best example ever. But that was true. The ones that we had RAS scores on were Howard, Bruner, and Kent. Their last 3 picks. I don't have Kent's RAS score, as you know, but it would be really good. The other guys just didn't do enough. So we're definitely going to say the big school trend holds up after 3 years. The visit thing / familiarity / scout son absolutely holds up. I mean, 3 of your 7 were in the building. The other 2 are Ohio State guys that you took to dinner, and one's your coach's son. Then the RAS thing definitely took a hit, without question. But it's going to be a little harder to get those numbers going forward, which isn't an excuse. It's just the facts. All right, everyone. I think I will probably do a mailbag to finish up the week. And I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions and whatnot. Over and out.